So, going off the standards that I talked about last week, I chose kindergarten and mathematics with a emphasis on counting. I can kind of evenly disperse my standards into different percentages. So, I think that I have about 50% of performance um, because that standard is kind of about being able to describe the development of the learner and has them demonstrate the content. So with math, you have a lot of demonstrations, which is why I have two of my four standards as performance. Another 25% would be product, and that's because that standard is about being able to do it, and like the word find gives it away. So like in my standard, it begins with the word find, so that kind of tells you that students should know how to do it. And then the last 25% I would say would go to reasoning because those define their thought processes and allows them to use the knowledge and understanding they have to figure out the problem or the situation. So mine are kind of like 50%, 25%, and another 25% to make a total of 100%. Um, with the next question, how consistent is the emphasis on particular learning target types in your standard document with the types of abilities you expect students would need for further learning in the subject area or careers adult life? I would say with my standards being mathematics, I think it's pretty consistent with what they are learning and what they should be able to do. As a kindergartner, this is where your math journey really begins, and so counting is like the number one thing you learn in math. But usually, going into kindergarten, a lot of students know how to count to like at least 10. Like their parents work with them, or preschool, they learn it in preschool or any of those. So I would say that like it's pretty consistent of what they should be able to do with like it's pretty consistent with the learning and what they should be able to do. And going into adult career life, I mean, we use counting every single day, whether it's as easy as counting the number of things in front of you or counting how many miles you run, etc. So I think this is really where it begins, and that like where your learning journey begins in kindergarten with counting, and from there it just kind of goes upward in a upward motion. So it's pretty consistent, I would say. With the last question, talking about the types of assessment, I think with these kindergarten mathematics standards, the two most common types of assessment from this week's reading that I would use would be select response or personal communication, just because with those selected responses, this can include like multiple choice questions or true false. So with in kindergarten, you're not going to have that many type of hard assessments with them. And so saying like a multiple choice, giving them like two options of what 5 plus 3 is, or how to count to like what number is after 63, giving them two options of those options would be something a kindergartner could do. And then with personal communication, this is just when like a teacher would be open and honest with their students, just going in and having their students explain their learning to them. So for example, I could go up to one of my students and ask them what number comes after, or what number comes in between 100 and 102, and they could say 101, and I would just be like, explain like how you got that, just like open communication within the teacher and the student. So that's a lot what kindergarten is as well. We don't have as many hard or like types of assessments as you do when you get older, and so I think those two would be the ones I would use the most. And then the ones I wouldn't use would be like written response and performance, just because those written responses can be like essay questions or like short answer, and like you're not going to get that in kindergarten. So I wouldn't use that a lot. And then the performance is like assessment based on observation of a performance, and like that is very typical. Like every teacher does that a lot too, but as a kindergarten teacher, I'm not really like assessing them on their performance with counting. Like I can obviously watch them and see that they're learning how to count, but it's not me assessing them that way, if that makes sense. Like I could use performance, but it just wouldn't be, I wouldn't use it in the assessment type. I would do more of a select response or a personal communication.